The alarm blares at 6 a.m., the same jarring sound it's been for the past 5 years. I hit snooze, but the vibration against the nightstand reminds me of the day ahead. Another day, another routine. I can almost predict the sequence: the lukewarm shower, the quick toast with a smear of jam, and then the drive to the office, the same route, the same traffic. It's a comfortable rhythm, a steady beat to my life with Sarah. Sarah, my wife. We've been together for 8 years, married for 6. We have our inside jokes, our shared routines, our comfortable silences. We know each other's coffee orders by heart, the way she hums off key when she's really into a song, the way I always leave my socks on the floor, much to her playful annoyance. It's a good life, a life built on a foundation of shared experiences and a comfortable understanding. Or so I thought. But then there's Mark. Mark is Sarah's best friend. They've known each other since college, a bond forged in late-night study sessions, shared dreams, and the kind of deep connection that comes from navigating those formative years together. He's always been a presence in our lives, a constant fixture at dinners, holidays, and weekend get-togethers. He's nice enough. Outgoing, always ready with a story, the kind of guy who can charm a room. But I've always felt a slight unease around him. It's not that I dislike him, not exactly. It's more of a subtle feeling of being on the outside of something, a shared history and understanding that I can't fully access. It's like there's a language they speak that I only catch fragments of, a code built over years of shared experiences. He has this way of looking at Sarah, a lingering gaze that feels different. It's not romantic, not overtly, but it's possessive, almost. Like he's marking his territory, reminding me, and maybe even her, of their long-standing connection. And his comments, sometimes they brush up against a line, an inside joke that seems a little too personal, a playful notch that lingers a little too long, a possessive tone when he talks about their past. Last Saturday, we were at Sarah's parents' house for a barbecue. The usual crowd, family, a few close friends, Mark, of course. We were all gathered around the picnic table, the smell of grilled burgers and laughter filling the air. Mark was telling a story about a college trip, a story Sarah had clearly heard a dozen times, judging by the way she rolled her eyes and smiled. He got to the part about a flat tire in the middle of nowhere and how Sarah apparently was the only one who knew how to change it. He said, Sarah's always been the practical one, the one who takes charge. I don't know what I would have done without her. He said it with this pride, this almost proprietary pride, like he was the one who had discovered this amazing quality in her. I made a joke, something lighthearted, about how Sarah is indeed a superhero, capable of anything, including changing tires in the middle of nowhere. It was meant to be playful, to include myself in the narrative, to show that I knew and appreciated this about her too. But Mark cut in, his tone a little sharper than necessary. Yeah, but I was there, I saw it firsthand. It was a small thing, a tiny jab, but it felt like a challenge, like he was reminding me that he had a claim on her past, on those moments that shaped her. I felt a flush of annoyance, a tightening in my chest. I said something back, something equally light, but with a slightly sharper edge, about how Sarah is still pretty amazing, even now. The conversation moved on, the laughter resumed, but the feeling lingered, the unspoken competition, the subtle reminder of their shared history. I felt a hand on my arm, Sarah's hand. She pulled me slightly away from the group, her expression a mix of concern and something I couldn't quite decipher. You need to apologize, she said. Apologize. The word hung in the air between us, a small, barbed thing. My first instinct was to argue, to defend myself, to explain that I hadn't said anything wrong, that Mark was the one who had made the situation uncomfortable. But Sarah's face, it wasn't angry exactly, it was more strained, like she was holding her breath, waiting for something, and I wasn't sure what. So I swallowed my initial reaction, the words that were already forming in my throat. I took a deep breath, trying to process the situation, to understand what she was seeing that I wasn't. Was I being overly sensitive? Was I misreading the dynamic between them? Or was there something more, something I wasn't picking up on? I mumbled something about not meaning to cause any trouble, about maybe misinterpreting the situation. It felt awkward, forced. The words felt clumsy and inadequate, like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It wasn't a genuine apology, not really. It was more of a truce, a temporary ceasefire to avoid further conflict. Sarah nodded, but her expression didn't change. She just said, He's been there for me a long time, you know. He doesn't always mean things the way they come across. There was a weariness in her voice, a subtle defensiveness that made me even more uneasy. It was like she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince me. I found Mark near the grill, flipping burgers with an almost theatrical flair. He looked up as I approached, a slightly too wide smile on his face. "Hey man," he said, the cheeriness in his voice sounding a little too bright, a little too forced. I mumbled the apology, the words feeling even more hollow as they left my mouth. "Mark, I just wanted to say, sorry about earlier. Didn't mean to step on any toes." He clapped me on the shoulder, the gesture feeling strangely patronizing. "No problem, dude. Water under the bridge. We all get a little passionate sometimes, right?" He gave me this knowing look, this look that seemed to imply some shared understanding, some unspoken agreement, but there was no shared understanding. There was only my growing discomfort, this nagging feeling that something wasn't right. The apology felt like a performance, a charade we both had to play for the sake of the evening, for the sake of keeping the peace. Later that night, after everyone had left, after we were cleaning up the remnants of the barbecue, I couldn't shake off the feeling. Sarah was quiet, unusually so. She moved around the kitchen, washing dishes with a deliberate, almost mechanical precision. I tried to make small talk, but my words felt flat and lifeless, bouncing off the tense silence that had settled between us. As she dried a plate, her gaze drifted towards the window, towards the dark backyard. "He's always been there," she said again, almost to herself, "through everything." "I know," I said, trying to sound supportive, but the words felt heavy with unspoken questions. "He's a good friend." She turned back to me, her eyes searching mine. "He is," she said, but there was a strange quality to her voice, a hint of something else, something that wasn't just friendship. That night, as we lay in bed, the comfortable silence that usually enveloped us felt different. It felt thick, heavy, with unspoken words and unanswered questions. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that a tiny crack had appeared in the foundation of our comfortable life. And then, as Sarah drifted off to sleep, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A single notification, a name I didn't recognize, but the initial was M. My heart skipped a beat. The next day started with the usual rush. Coffee, a quick kiss goodbye, the familiar scent of Sarah's perfume lingering in the air as I headed out the door. Everything seemed normal, routine, but I couldn't shake off the feeling from the night before, the unease that had settled in my stomach. It was like a tiny pebble in my shoe, something small but persistent, a constant reminder that something was off. At work, I tried to focus, to lose myself in the familiar tasks, but my mind kept drifting back to Sarah, to Mark, to that strange, almost possessive way he looked at her. And then there was the M on her phone. It was during lunch. I had called Sarah to see if she wanted to grab a quick bite, but she didn't answer. I left a message, a casual, "Hey, just checking in. Call me back when you get a chance." A few minutes later, she texted back, "Busy. Talk later." Short, clipped, unlike her usual, more expressive texts. I shrugged it off, telling myself she was probably just swamped at work. But then, as I scrolled through my social media feed, a notification popped up on my phone. Sarah had posted a picture, a group photo from a work event the previous week. And there, in the background, standing close to her, was a man. A man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident smile. He wasn't touching Sarah, not in the photo, but they were close, their shoulders almost brushing. And something about the way they were standing, the way their heads were tilted slightly towards each other, it felt familiar, too familiar. My heart skipped a beat. I zoomed in on the photo, studying his face, trying to find any clue, any hint that I might have seen him before, but nothing. He was a complete stranger. A wave of confusion washed over me, quickly followed by a prickle of something else. Something I didn't want to name. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time, a feeling of insecurity, of being threatened. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself I was being ridiculous. Sarah has work friends, of course she does. I don't know everyone she works with, but the image of that man, standing so close to her, it kept replaying in my mind. Later that evening, Sarah came home, her usual bright smile slightly dimmed. "Long day," she said, collapsing onto the couch with a sigh. "Yeah?" I asked, trying to sound casual, trying to keep my voice even. "Anything interesting happen?" She shrugged. "The usual meetings, deadlines, you know how it is." "I saw your post from last week," I said, the words slipping out before I could fully think them through. "Who was that guy you were standing with?" She paused, her eyes widening slightly. "Which guy?" "The one with the dark hair," I said, trying to keep my tone light, but I could feel the tension tightening in my chest. "Standing next to you." She hesitated for a moment, then said, "Oh, that's Mark. From accounting. He just started recently." Mark. From accounting. Not M, not the name from the notification on her phone. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the two. Was it a coincidence? Was she lying? Or was I just being paranoid? "He seems friendly," I said, the word feeling heavy with unspoken questions. Sarah gave a small, almost nervous laugh. "Yeah, he is. Everyone likes him." The conversation moved on, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The image of that man, the M on her phone, Sarah's slightly too quick explanation, it all added up to something I didn't want to acknowledge, something I was afraid to explore. But I knew deep down that I couldn't ignore it. I had to know. That night, the question of who M was kept circling in my head. I tried to push it aside, to focus on other things, but it was like a persistent hum, a background noise that wouldn't go away. I found myself subtly watching Sarah, observing her interactions, her phone habits. It was a strange feeling, this mix of love and suspicion, this internal conflict between wanting to trust her completely and the nagging feeling that something was amiss. The next morning, Sarah was getting ready for work. She was in the bathroom and her phone was on the counter, face up. I was in the bedroom pretending to be looking for my keys, but really I was watching her phone. It felt wrong, intrusive, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to see. A text message popped up. The sender's name flashed on the screen, M. My heart pounded. It was the same initial. My breath hitched in my throat. I quickly looked away, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. I shouldn't be doing this. I should trust her. But the image of the man from the photo, the way Sarah had hesitated when she mentioned him, the short, clipped text message from yesterday, it all came rushing back, fueling my suspicion. Later that day, I found myself thinking about the M again. I tried to remember the exact content of the notification. Was there a full name? A picture? I couldn't recall. My memory felt fuzzy, distorted by the anxiety and the feeling of doing something I shouldn't have. I decided to try a different approach. I casually brought up Sarah's work again during dinner. "So, how's that new guy Mark settling in?" I asked, trying to sound light and conversational. Sarah looked up from her plate. "He's fine," she said, a little too quickly, I thought. "He's a hard worker." "I was just wondering," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I don't think I've ever heard you mention him before." She shrugged. "There's a lot of new people in accounting. I don't talk about everyone." Her answer felt evasive, like she was deliberately avoiding the topic. It made me even more suspicious. Why was she being so guarded about this guy? Over the next few days, I noticed other small things. Sarah was spending more time on her phone, often texting with a small smile on her face, but she would quickly turn the screen away when I came near. She started coming home later from work, saying she had extra meetings or projects, but she seemed vague about the details, and there was a distance between us, a subtle shift in our dynamic. The easy, comfortable conversations we used to have felt strained, forced. I was living in a constant state of anxiety, torn between my love for Sarah and the growing fear that she was keeping something from me. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing, afraid to push too hard, but also afraid of what I might find if I dug deeper. One evening, I was doing laundry. Sarah had left her work bag on the floor of the bedroom. As I picked it up, a small folded piece of paper slipped out. It was a receipt from a restaurant I didn't recognize, and the date was last week, the night Sarah said she had a late meeting. My hands trembled as I unfolded the receipt. It was for 2 people, and the name on the receipt, it wasn't Sarah's. It was a man's name that started with an M. My hands shook as I stared at the receipt. The paper was thin, almost translucent, and the name printed on it seemed to jump out at me, bold and undeniable. It was a man's name, a name that started with an M, and it was dated for last Tuesday, the night Sarah said she was working late. A wave of nausea washed over me, a cold, sickening feeling that spread from my stomach to my fingertips. It was like the world had tilted on its axis, like the solid ground beneath my feet had suddenly turned to sand. I felt a buzzing in my ears, a strange detachment from my own body. This couldn't be happening, not to us, not to Sarah and me. We were the couple with the inside jokes, the comfortable silences, the shared dreams. We were the couple who knew each other's coffee orders by heart. But the receipt was there, in my hand, a physical piece of evidence that shattered the picture I had of our life. It was a small thing, a simple piece of paper, but it held the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, 1,000 unanswered questions. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Who was this man? What was Sarah doing at a restaurant with him on a night she said she was working late? What did this mean for us, for our relationship? I remembered the way Sarah had been acting lately. The extra time on her phone, the vague explanations, the distance that had grown between us. It all started to fit together, like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. A sharp pain pierced through my chest, a feeling of betrayal so profound it was almost physical. It was like someone had punched me in the gut, knocking the wind out of me. I felt a tightness in my throat, a lump of emotion that I couldn't swallow. I thought about all the happy memories, the moments we had shared, the laughter, the love, the plans we had made for the future. They all seemed to be tainted now, overshadowed by this new horrifying reality. Was everything a lie? Had she been lying to me all along? I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images that were flashing through my mind. Sarah laughing with this man, sharing a meal, sharing a secret. The thought was unbearable. I felt a surge of anger, a hot, burning rage that threatened to consume me. How could she do this to me? How could she throw away everything we had built together? But beneath the anger, there was a deep, aching sadness. A grief for the life I thought I had, for the future I had imagined. It was like losing someone I loved, even though she was still there, still sleeping in the same bed, still saying, "I love you," in the morning. But it wasn't the same. It couldn't be the same. The trust was broken, the foundation cracked, and in that moment I knew that everything had changed. Everything. Confrontation. The word echoed in my mind, a heavy, unavoidable thing. My chest felt tight, like a band was constricting around it, making it hard to breathe. Should I do it? Should I just walk into the living room where Sarah was reading and lay it all out? The receipt, the late nights, the M on her phone, everything? Or should I wait? Should I try to process this on my own first, to make sense of the chaos that was swirling inside me? Maybe there was a rational explanation. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions, but the logical part of my brain was fighting a losing battle against the raw emotion. I played out the scenarios in my head, over and over again. I imagined myself walking into the living room, the receipt clutched in my hand. I imagined Sarah's reaction, shock, denial, tears. I imagined the words I would say, the questions I would ask, the accusations I would hurl. "Who is he, Sarah?" I would say, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Who is this man, this M you've been seeing behind my back?" Or maybe I would be calmer, more measured. "Sarah, I found this," I would say, holding out the receipt. "Can you explain this to me?" But even in my imagined scenarios, there was no easy answer. There was no way to confront her without causing pain, without shattering the fragile peace that still existed between us. I thought about our past, about the years we had spent building our life together, the shared laughter, the late-night talks, the dreams we had for the future. Could all of that just disappear? Could it all be erased by this one devastating discovery? The anger was still there. a hot, burning ember in my chest, but it was mixed with a deep, aching sadness, a grief for the life I thought I had, for the future I had imagined. It was like losing someone I loved, even though she was still there, still sleeping in the same bed, still saying, "I love you," in the morning. But it wasn't the same. It couldn't be the same. The trust was broken, the foundation cracked, and I knew that whatever happened, things would never be the same again. I also thought about the M. Who was he to Sarah? Just a work colleague, a friend, or something more? The thought of her with someone else, sharing intimate moments, sharing secrets, it was like a knife twisting in my heart. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep this inside. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when my world was crumbling around me. I needed answers, deserved to know the truth no matter how painful it might be. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My hands were still shaking, my heart was still pounding, but I knew what I had to do. I had to confront her. I had to face the truth, whatever it might be. I walked into the living room. Sarah was sitting on the couch, reading a book, a soft light illuminating her face. She looked up as I entered, a small, questioning smile on her lips. It was a smile I had seen 1,000 times, a smile that used to fill me with warmth. But tonight, it felt like a mask, a fragile attempt at normalcy. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in my voice. The receipt was still clutched in my hand, a silent accusation. I held it out to her. "I found this," I said, my voice low and steady, but with an undercurrent of something else, something dark and wounded. Sarah's smile faded. Her eyes widened slightly as she took the receipt, her gaze scanning the paper. Her expression shifted from surprise to confusion, then to something else, something I couldn't quite place. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It's a receipt," I said, my voice hardening, "from a restaurant, for 2 people, dated last Tuesday, the night you said you were working late." Sarah's face paled. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else. Guilt? I don't understand," she stammered. "Don't lie to me, Sarah," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "I know you weren't working late. I know you were with someone else." Her eyes filled with tears. It's not what you think," she said, her voice shaking. "Then what is it?" I demanded, my anger rising. "Who is this M you've been texting? Who is this man you were having dinner with?" Sarah looked down, her shoulders slumping. She didn't say anything for a long moment, the silence stretching between us, thick and heavy with unspoken words. "It's Mark," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "Mark." My stomach dropped. I should have known. It all came crashing down, the pieces of the puzzle finally fitting together. The unease, the strange looks, the possessive comments, it all pointed to him. "Mark," I said, my voice incredulous. "Your best friend, Mark?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. It happened once," she said. "A few weeks ago, we went out for dinner. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated, the word feeling hollow and meaningless. "A mistake that you kept secret from me? A mistake that you lied to me about?" "I was going to tell you," she said, her voice pleading. I didn't know how. I was scared." "Scared?" I scoffed. "Scared of hurting me? You didn't seem to care about hurting me when you were out with him." The words were harsh, accusatory, but I couldn't stop them. The pain and betrayal were pouring out of me, a torrent of emotion I couldn't control. "It was a moment of weakness," she said, her voice breaking. "I was confused. He's always been there for me, and I leaned on him, but it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake." "A mistake that you didn't tell me about," I repeated, the words like a broken record. "A mistake that you tried to hide from me." Sarah looked at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "Please believe me," she said. "I love you. I would never do anything to intentionally hurt you." But the words felt empty. The trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces, and I didn't know if I could ever put them back together. The silence that followed Sarah's confession was deafening. The air in the living room felt thick and heavy, charged with unspoken words and raw emotion. I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said, but my mind was reeling, struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. Sarah sat on the couch, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I wanted to reach out to her, to comfort her, but I couldn't. The pain and betrayal were too fresh, too raw. The trust that had been the bedrock of our relationship was shattered, and I didn't know how or if it could ever be repaired. The room felt cold, sterile. The soft light that had illuminated Sarah's face moments ago now seemed harsh and unforgiving, highlighting the lines of distress etched on her skin. The comfortable familiarity of our home, the place where we had shared so many happy memories, now felt alien, tainted by the shadow of infidelity. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the receipt still clutched in my hand, the silence broken only by Sarah's muffled sobs. Finally I spoke, my voice barely a whisper. What does this mean, Sarah?" She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "I don't know," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know what it means." But I knew. Deep down, I knew that this wasn't just a mistake. This was a betrayal, a breach of trust that would have consequences. Our life together, the life we had built with so much love and care, was unraveling before my eyes. That night, we didn't sleep in the same bed. I moved to the guest room, the unfamiliar surroundings adding to the sense of dislocation and loss. The sheets felt cold and unwelcoming, and the silence in the room was deafening, amplified by the absence of Sarah's presence beside me. The next few days were a blur of pain and confusion. We barely spoke, the words that passed between us clipped and strained. The comfortable routines that had once defined our days were gone, replaced by an awkward, tense silence. I found myself withdrawing, retreating into myself, trying to protect myself from further hurt. I spent long hours at work, throwing myself into projects, seeking refuge in the familiar tasks and routines. I avoided coming home, dreading the inevitable conversations, the painful silences, the constant reminder of what had happened. One evening, I met with my friend David. I hadn't told him anything about what had happened, but he could sense that something was wrong. He listened patiently as I poured out my heart, the words tumbling out of me in a rush of pain and anger. "I don't know what to do, man," I said, my voice breaking. "I love her, but I don't know if I can ever trust her again. How do you come back from something like this?" David didn't have any easy answers. He just listened, offering a sympathetic ear and a shoulder to lean on. But his presence, his simple act of being there for me, helped to ease the pain, to remind me that I wasn't alone. The days turned into weeks, and the initial shock began to subside, replaced by a dull ache, a constant reminder of the loss. The future stretched before me, uncertain and unfamiliar. I knew that I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I had to make a decision, to find a way to move forward, but I didn't know what that looked like. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of looking back and trying to move forward. I found myself replaying the events in my mind, searching for clues I might have missed, moments where I could have seen this coming. I thought about the early days of our relationship, the easy laughter, the shared dreams, and how it had all seemed so perfect. But now those memories were tinged with a sense of doubt. Had there been signs? Had I been too blind, too trusting, to see what was really happening? I remembered the times Sarah had seemed distant, the times she had been preoccupied, the times she had brushed off my concerns. Were those moments just normal fluctuations in a relationship, or were they hints of something more? I thought a lot about Mark. His presence in our lives had always been a constant, a familiar backdrop to our relationship. But now I saw him in a different light. I remembered his possessive gaze, his subtle jabs, the way he had always seemed to assert his connection with Sarah. Was he just a friend, as Sarah had always insisted? Or was there something more, something deeper, that I had failed to see? I wondered about the nature of their relationship. What did they talk about when I wasn't around? What secrets did they share? What kind of bond did they have that was so strong, so unbreakable, that it could lead to this? The questions swirled in my head, unanswered and unsettling. I also thought about myself. Had I contributed to this in some way? Had I taken Sarah for granted? Had I been too focused on my own life, my own work, to notice her needs, her feelings? I knew that relationships required constant effort, constant communication, but had I been doing enough? The guilt was a heavy weight, a constant companion to the pain and betrayal. I couldn't help but wonder if I could have prevented this, if I could have done something differently. But the past was the past, and I couldn't change it. All I could do was try to learn from it, to understand what had gone wrong. I started to take small steps forward, to try to rebuild my life, to find a new normal. I spent more time with my friends, engaging in activities that I enjoyed, things that had fallen by the wayside in the comfort of our routine. I started to think about the future, about what I wanted, about who I wanted to be. The process was slow and painful, filled with moments of doubt and despair. But with each passing day, the pain seemed to lessen slightly, the edges of the wound becoming a little less raw. I began to see that life could go on, even after such a devastating loss. I knew that I would never forget what had happened, that the scars would always be there, but I also knew that I couldn't let this define me, that I couldn't let the past dictate my future. I had to find a way to move forward, to find happiness again, even if it was different from the happiness I had once known. Time passed, not in a rush, but in a slow, deliberate way, the kind of time that allows wounds to begin to heal, but also leaves behind scars. I moved out of the apartment Sarah and I had shared. It wasn't a dramatic exit, no slammed doors or shouting matches, just a quiet packing of my belongings, a few shared, strained conversations about logistics, and then I was gone. I found a small place of my own, a simple apartment with clean lines and a view of the city skyline. It was a far cry from the home I had shared with Sarah, but it was mine. A space where I could begin to piece myself back together, to figure out who I was without her. The days were filled with a new routine: work, the gym, dinners with friends, the occasional weekend trip. I tried to fill the void, to keep myself busy, to avoid dwelling on the past. But the memories were always there, lurking beneath the surface, surfacing at unexpected moments. A song on the radio, a familiar scent, a glimpse of a couple holding hands. They all triggered a pang of sadness, a reminder of what I had lost. I saw Sarah occasionally. We met for coffee, for lunch, to discuss the practicalities of separating our lives. The conversations were polite, almost formal. We talked about finances, about dividing our belongings, about the logistics of moving forward. But we didn't talk about us. We didn't talk about the why or the what if. Those conversations felt too painful, too raw. I learned a lot about myself during that time. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive pain and loss. I learned that I was capable of building a new life, even if it wasn't the life I had planned. I learned that trust, once broken, is a fragile thing, and that it takes time and perhaps a leap of faith to rebuild. The initial argument with Mark, it seemed so insignificant now, a small spark that had ignited a much larger fire. Sarah's words, "You need to apologize," they had seemed like a simple request at the time, a way to smooth things over to keep the peace, but they had been a turning point, a moment that had set in motion a chain of events that had changed everything. Looking back, I realized that the problem wasn't the apology itself. It was what lay beneath the surface, the unspoken tensions, the hidden secrets, the fragile balance of relationships. The apology my wife wanted was for something entirely different than what truly needed addressing. The experience changed me. It made me more cautious, more guarded, but it also made me more aware of the importance of honesty, of communication, of the fragile nature of trust. I knew that I would never be the same, that the scars of the past would always be with me. But I also knew that I could move forward, that I could find happiness again, even if it was a different kind of happiness, and that, in itself, was a kind of hope.